Hi, my name is Suzanne Culberg. I'm the Nope Coach, and I'm so excited to share with Pearl today.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here. Once you leave the clouds, you're under. Ain't it funny how there ain't no rain or clear? Why'd it take so long to leave you in the rearview mirror? Now nobody gonna steal my sunshine or turn my blue sky gray. All I know is at the end of the day, wildflowers grow when there ain't no shade.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl. Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Pearl. And today we've been doing a lot of recording around setting boundaries. So I'm so excited to bring somebody else on to talk about boundaries with us today. And our special guest is coming all the way from the next day in Sydney, Australia. So she's a day ahead of me. And her name is Suzanne Culberg. She is an author and coach who helps overgivers and people pleasers learn to set boundaries and say no without feeling mean. Suzanne is known for her straight talking and her wacky t-shirts. She lives in Sydney, Australia with her husband and two awesome children. Suzanne, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Pearl. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes, I can't wait to get into this today. So tell us about a little bit about you. I know you're from Sydney, Australia, but what led you to do what you're doing today?
Oh, I was going to say, long story short, they say that you teach what you most need to learn so that you can learn it. I'm the youngest of four, and it's kind of easy being the youngest to be the one who is the people pleaser, is the placater, is the one who takes up the least amount of space and be's quiet and, kind of helps everybody else to get along. And then eventually you kind of realize that you lose sight, or you've never really known who you are in amongst that, because I know what everyone else likes. And it was very interesting. A few years ago, it was a birthday of mine. My birthday's about to come up, thinking of this today. After recording this, I'm going up and always wanted to do it to one of those smash rooms where you get like a bat and smash stuff. Very excited for this. But I remember it being my birthday and getting some gifts from different family members. Gifts is my love language. And it was fascinating because I was like, that's your favorite color. And it's like, no, that's someone else's. Oh, you really like white chocolate? No, I actually don't like it at all. That's someone else. So you're realizing that you're the person who kind of knows everything about everyone else and nobody really knows you. But instead of getting in that victim-y, blame game, martyr kind of thing, it's like, well, whose fault? Like, who's responsible for this? Not that you want to be like, hey, look at me or anything like that. But it's kind of like, sometimes, being a people pleaser and being an overgiver and feeling that people don't really know you, the wake-up call is that you haven't actually allowed yourself to take up that space and be known. You've just been like, okay, thanks, when something's happened. And you don't ever want to like rock the boat or whatever, or, be rude by saying, actually, I don't like this. But by realizing that, you haven't allowed people to get to know the real you. So that is a snapshot of how I came to do what I do now.
That's awesome. And I am just like you. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a former people pleaser. I used to say yes to everybody and everything. And I struggled saying no. And also struggling for, like what you said, letting people get to know who the real me was. And, I thought I had to be this person that was out there. And then as I started to come into understanding I have to learn to say no to others, I actually went through this process of having a pebble. I talk about this often on the show. Is I had a pebble and I had to move it 3 times in the day by saying no to something. So that was making sure I said yes to what I wanted to say yes to. And so, if I had to put it in my pocket, my bra strap, whatever it was, I had it with me. And I found that as I was saying no, I was actually aligning with the things I truly love to do. And then the epiphany was when I said no, there was somebody waiting in the wings. I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to help with that. And so had I said yes, I would have held them back, right? So it's hard, I was the oldest in the family, the opposite. So you're always, you're the one that set an example. You have to be the example, so you always want to please your parents, but don't do anything wrong. Don't let me find out, so it was that whole narrative that when we're younger and we learn those things, we don't realize it till we get older. It's like, I got to release that stuff. I don't have to please everybody. I don't have to do everything. So I love.
Yeah, something that served us when we were younger can actually be maladaptive when we're an adult. And I loved the example you gave of somebody else waiting in the wings. Like sometimes when we don't want to say no because we don't want to let somebody down or we don't want to leave them adrift. But when we say yes and it's not aligned or it's not in service to both of us, we are actually getting in the way of somebody who's like, sure, I would love to do that. And we're just kind of mediocring, like, the Smash Room thing's a perfect example. I've wanted to go to one for years. My husband is not interested in any way, shape or form. And it's just been, in the back of my mind. And then last month, a friend messaged me and she said something or other about it. And I said, oh, I'd love to go to one of those. And we live about an hour from each other. And she said, let's find one. So we found one in the middle. And, it's her birthday the day after mine. And the joke is we're going to get smashed for our birthday. But it's like there's somebody who wants to do this just as much as I do. And instead of dragging my poor husband along or going on my own, which you'd be okay, but nowhere near as fun, when you put the feelers out there or just allow, that match will come along.
That's so true. It's like, my husband and I, sometimes there's many things he's like, you can go do that. That's just not interesting to me. And a Smash thing, I forget about that. That's something I've always wanted to do too. So I wish I could fly to you to go join you, but I can't right now.
If you come to Australia one day, you said it was on your bucket list before we hit record. If you come to Australia one day, I will take you. Let's go smash some stuff.
I'm in for that. I'm all in for that. So tell us, as you have gone through this and you started, on your journey to overcoming the people pleaser and really understanding who you were, Suzanne, in your core, tell us how that evolved into your business. And then walk us through, when you're working with your clients, how do you help them get to that core of understanding this is a challenge, we got to help you work through it, and walk us through how you help them do that.
Well, so what I've come to creates a formula just so people kind of get a baseline understanding. I call it the overgiving cycle. So many of us, we make plans, whether that be a business plan, it could be an exercise plan, it could be a diet. I can't stand that word. I've got an allergy to it. A meal plan. we plan, we're like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to, it's going to be great. And then someone comes along, family member, friend, child, neighbor, whoever, could you just, and they ask us to do something. And I just want to put a caveat here. There's a difference between a legitimate urgency, like someone needs to be taken to the hospital or something, and somebody just, not being organized and then making it our problem. Like, could you just pick up my script, take me to this, help me practice, help me study, whatever. And we go, sure. So we drop our thing. We're like, oh, I'll go to the gym tomorrow. I'll write that blog tomorrow. The vegetables, they'll last one more day. I'll go and get some takeout because it keeps everyone happy. And then we feel a little bit resentful, whether we admit it to ourselves or not. Sometimes we don't in the beginning. We're like, oh no, I love to be helpful. But after a while, we feel a little bit resentful that we're not actually taking action on our stuff. So the pair for our overgiving, our stopping our stuff and helping everyone else, is over-consuming in some way. Giving and receiving are like inhaling and exhaling. You can't have one without the other. They're paired states. So over-giving is paired with over-consuming. And what this tends to look like is staying up late, watching Netflix, eating chips or chocolate or ice cream, shopping, like Amazon Prime is your best friend. You're like, where did this come from? And then what we do is we feel really guilty that we've overconsumed. So we're like, oh, I need a new plan. So it's like that plan, that meal plan, that exercise plan, that business plan, that was no good. I need a new plan. And we spend all of our time looking for the right plan, the one that's going to be, the thing, instead of actually going, all the plans work. Like, it works if you work it. And the reason I'm not sticking to it is because I'm too much available to everybody else. So it's like learning to intervene in that point of saying, no, thank you, not today, rather than ditching our stuff, because that's an external boundary someone's asking. But then we have our internal boundaries. Like, if it's like, I've got on my plan to exercise, but it's too hot. I was saying to Pearl before we hit record, it's really hot here at the moment. Or it's too cold, or I'm too tired. And then what we can do is we can go and look for people to save. Like, we can go and martyr ourselves. Oh, do you need help with And then we let ourselves off the hook there and then convince ourselves that it's not the right plan, rather than not forcing. I don't believe in forcing, but, creating momentum in taking action rather than waiting for motivation. So what my own journey was, personally, my overgiving was that bad, and my overconsuming was food. I was a foodie. So I ate my way to twice what I weigh now. I was 150 kilos, which is 330 pounds. And I tried every diet that I'd heard of, and many I wished I hadn't. Convinced that I just had to find the right diet. And it was like the less space I allowed myself to take up mentally and emotionally. Sure, I love that color. Yes, I love this thing. Oh, that I can do that for you. The more I ate, the more space I took up physically. And when I started to actually put the boundaries in place and say no to people and feel all those uncomfortable feelings or that fear of disappointing people, the weight kind of took care of itself. Like, it wasn't like nothing. I didn't have to do, it was effortless, not effort none. So because I was actually following through on the things that I knew to do. So many people I work with, I know what to do, I just don't do it. So let's get you doing that. And a lot of that is by saying no to others. Oh, I can't hear you.
I forgot to take myself on mute. That was so powerful. And wow, congratulations to lose, like, to recognize that and recognize that how it's affecting your health, and to be like, I need to do something. Because you're right. We do that. We Amazon shop, we eat, all those things that we do because we want to suppress, bury, not face the feelings we need to face, because, we say yes so excitedly to everybody. But when it comes to saying no, we're like, I can't help you do that. Right. We're like, but it's like, I love coaching women. We have what we call the Shiro League and our Shiro method. And in our Shiro method, we talk about owning the no, like own that no and say no just as happily as you say yes, because guess what? You're saying no to them, but you're really saying yes to yourself. And so when you own that no, you step into that. And you're right. Like, our health can really, it changes everything about us, from your mind, body, and spirit, and your health, and is that big part of it. And I remember, I lost my son last July in a tragic car accident, and I lost over 60 pounds over the last, and I've maintained it pretty much over the last 5 to 8 years now, I think it's been. And so when he passed, it's so interesting how we creep back into those habits, those comfort habits, right? Even though we know, but when those things creep up on us, we get right back in there. And I literally was like, in December, I'm like, okay, 6 months, this is enough. I can't go down this path. I didn't live this way when he was alive. Why am I doing this just because he's gone? And so I took back that control. I took back that saying yes again and saying no to me. And I said yes to me. And I mean, I'm down like 23 pounds since December, and it's awesome. But it's easy to creep into those things because we're afraid to face our fears. We're afraid to answer, state how we feel. That pleasing, can be so daunting that it just sends us down a path that mentally is not fit for us. And that's why I love, I coach what's called positive intelligence, also known as PQ. And it's a 6-week course. We identify, what are your saboteurs? Where are the judges showing up? Are you a people pleaser? Where do you fall on this? And then, are you a risk taker? Are you somebody who's not, happy because you hit a goal and now you want the next goal, right? So we walk through that, and we talk about that judge and that saboteur, and we name it. Like her name is Betsy. Betsy shows up. I'm like, hey, no, Betsy, you need to take a walk somewhere else because you ain't coming in here today, right? And so you gave great examples of how that can change our life. And over 300 pounds, that's congratulations. And that's not easy, because you had to do some tough work, I'm sure, right?
100%. And I think for so many of us, our goal seems so far away that we're like, today doesn't matter. Like, this one workout skipped, or this one extra thing eaten, or this one blog post not written, or this one newsletter not sent. And we forget the compound interest of these little actions taken consistently adds up to the big thing over time. And when we have the slip up, like we all do, instead of using it as a thing to beat ourselves up for, or I've blown it now, I'm going to start again tomorrow, or Monday, the universal day to change your life. In this moment, in any moment, you have the agency to make a different choice. And instead of seeing the slip ups as there's something fundamentally wrong with me or whatever, it's like, oh, I had a momentary lapse, or, I'm a human. I had a human moment. And now I can just make another decision to pick up exactly here, right now, not, and I think when you take the pressure off of the all or nothing, like you were speaking about resistances, procrastinator, martyr, like I talk about a lot of these in my program as well. But one of the ones I see is the extremist, the all or nothing. So you're either on the wagon or off the wagon, or you're doing all the things or none of the things. And, really coming to terms with that pattern of behavior. And as you said, like, I love how you give it a name and acknowledge, oh, there you are again, but you're not driving the bus. Like, you're allowed in the car, you have a place. I'm not banishing you or exiling you or making you wrong. You are a part of me, but you're not in the driver's seat anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And, I love how if we're not careful, we let it control us, and then it becomes a huge, bigger issue. And that's why I learned to name her when she shows up, and, have that conversation around, okay, this is what you can show up for me today and what you can't. It's so powerful. So as you walk your clients through this, Suzanne, and you see them, what are some of the biggest things you see right now that most people are dealing with? I mean, you're over in Australia, we're over here in the US. And I know we've all come through the pandemic. We're this whole new world after the pandemic now. And I know it took you guys longer to really be out and about than I think we did, right? I think you were still locked down to what, like last year?
We had the longest continuous lockdown in the world in Sydney. It was 114 days or something, intense.
Wow.
And we weren't allowed more than 5 kilometers from our front door. Australians, we're a very sarcastic nation. So a lot of us had the memes of somebody like carrying a door on their shoulders saying not more than 5 kilometers. So I just take the front door with me. But a lot of the things on the back end of that is a lot of scarcity from people, because there's so much unknown or uncertainty. So I'm going to have the thing now because I don't know what's happening tomorrow, or the threat of a recession or interest rates rising, and this thing that I've got to hold on to, I've got to cut back. And it's interesting how when we focus, like, it's just a little shift from shifting your focus of cutting back and controlling and holding on to there's no pie here. It's not like if by you taking something, you're taking away from anywhere else or anybody else having less. It's like just shifting into the mindset of, there is more than enough. And by you taking up that space, and I think it's different. It's claiming rather than taking, because I think take is such a strong word. I talk a lot about word allergies, and I think take, it means take away from. Like, if I take this, someone else gets less. Whereas if it's claiming that space and, looking to the future, like future you who's already achieved this thing. So the perfect example, my son, he's 7, he has autism. So a lot of things that come naturally to people are a struggle for him. And my daughter's 9 and she's neurotypical. And she's like, I just don't understand why he has we're having this conversation just last night. She's like, why does Casimir see a psychotherapist, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist? Like, why does he, like, I never needed any of all these things. And it's kind of like how this relates to people pleasing or to people in general. Meeting yourself where you're at. Some of us will need support in areas that others don't, and it doesn't make sense to you. Like, why are they doing this? But if it makes sense to you that you need this and it feels fulfilling for you. So the example that I picked to explain, because once again, she's 9, so doesn't quite fully get it. But I was like, something like tying a shoe. She's like, I've been tying my shoe since kindy, and it came naturally. It was really easy to her. Whereas we've been working with my son for months now, like just the first knot and then getting the bunny's ears and then, all this sort of stuff. I'm like, for others of us, it takes multiple steps. And I think for us to sit back, instead of judging and blaming and shooting on ourselves and going, well, this person's so much better than me because they did it faster or whatever. It's not a competition. It's not a race. With my clients, an analogy I use is we are all a bag of popcorn. Stay with me. So you buy the bag of popcorn and you get it from the shop and it says, put it in the microwave for 2 minutes. And you put it in there and you press start and you're waiting and you're waiting. Was it a watch pot never boils, a watch microwave never pops? And like you get to the 1 minute 30 mark and you're thinking this bag of popcorn's dodgy. Like I've bought the bung bag, like I'm hungry and nothing's happening. And then like say 1 minute 45, you get this errant pop and then another one. And you're like, great, I've got 2 kids. I've got 2 pieces of popped popcorn. Like this is not going to go far. And then with like 5 seconds to go, it's like pop, 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 pop. You know, and then the microwave stops and there's that couple that go afterward, like the errant pops that go. So like we are all popcorn. We go in our own time. Some of us are really fortunate that we're like the minute 40 ones that go at the beginning. And some of us are like the 2 minute and 5 second ones. And this is such a short period of time, but in whatever we're trying to achieve, it can be a longer period. And when we stop comparing and doom scrolling on the internet, our life gets a lot easier.
I love that analogy. It's so true too. You put it in the popcorn, it's like, is it popping yet? Is it popping yet? I love that thought. And you're right too. And it's important. I love that you're doing this with your daughter so young, because we have to help our kids understand that sometimes you do need help with things and sometimes things come slower. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means you're learning differently. And that's okay. It's like, I forget how she said it, but I interviewed somebody and she's in a wheelchair and she says differently abled, she called it. Instead of disabled, I'm differently abled. And I love that, you know, that whole process. And that's, I think through COVID, because we all were home inside so much, we have to recognize, and you know, mental fitness and mental awareness is starting to become more talked about openly, but we still have a long way to go. And to understand that we are different, that everybody learns differently, reacts differently. And then to be able to say, you know, to teach your daughter that, well, yeah, you know, you learned at a young age, but it's going to take your brother a little longer, right? It reminds me of the story I share. My oldest was adopted, so he was mixed race. And then we had our younger son through infertility. They're like 2.5 years apart. And so when Nate first came home, Matthew, we always talked, you know, Matthew was mixed race. We didn't really talk color. We wanted to let them understand this is how we're different. So Matthew would be like, well, why is he a different color? And I was like, well, you know, you're Czechoslovakian and Haitian. He's Italian and German. So our colors mix differently, like when you do crayons and stuff at school. And then as our younger son, Nate, was becoming older, he was a little slow in talking. So he would do this thing where he would scratch at his arm. And we couldn't figure out why. We'd be like, Nate, you know, what's going on? He's like, he just wouldn't, he wasn't talking very well. And so finally, one time we're in Virginia, we're living in Virginia, we're now in Florida. And we had this huge snowstorm and the kids were out there and they were sliding on the sleds and everything. And Nate came into the room and he's like, just crying, so upset, crying. And like, I take his coat off so I can figure out what's going on. And he just starts going at his arm, like he's scratching his arm. And I was like, Nate, stop. You have to tell me what's wrong. Because I reached that point of not understanding that I probably could have gone, you know, when I look back, I'm like, we probably should have took him to see if he had any, you know, autism traits or anything like that. But finally he talked and he goes, I just want to be like brother. He thought if he scratched his arm, his color would change. Right. And I was like, oh my gosh, we never had that conversation with Nate to help him understand why they look so differently. Right. And so I think in today's world, we need that conversation. We need to be open with conversations of how we're differently abled, how we're differently, you know, created, and that some of us learn differently than others. And those are things that we work with. And this is how we can support them. And, you know, I was talking earlier on another episode, we were talking about, since all this mental awareness that's coming out of COVID, there's so much more awareness of it, that in schools, and that over here in our schools, we have what's called the morning show, Suzanne. And we get on there and we do Pledge of Allegiance and things like that. And I'm like, how cool would it be if we can create like affirmation morning in the morning show, like throw in some affirmations. It's a beautiful day today. You're going to learn so greatly. Or even like before you end the show, go, okay, everybody sit down, put your feet on the ground, your hands on your desk, and take a few deep breaths and just help them like calm their mind before the craziness of the day. And I feel like if we could start incorporating some of that in our schools, my hope is that we reduce some of these shootings we see, some of the mental fitness that we see, because there's some calmness to say, I've created this space for you to share, to feel at peace, and, you know, have some, you know, some thought process that you're going to have a great day. Even though things at home may seem crazy, in here is a place you can have a great day. And I just sort of like, it's been really heavy on my heart lately. And I feel like I'm like, I need to figure out how this goes. Right. And I don't have, my kids are forever 25 and 23. So, and I don't have grandbabies yet. So I don't know how parents do that today with what's happening, especially since COVID in the world. What are your thoughts on that, Suzanne?
My children's school, we haven't been allowed in since COVID, like the parents have to wait outside. But at the beginning of this year, because our school year runs different to yours, we run on the calendar year because our seasons are different. And we were actually allowed in. And given my son with his autism, he can struggle to change to a new teacher, a new therapist, and there can be a transition period. I was concerned. But when I got to go in and see around the classroom, they had these posters, which I just loved so much, the children had made, and they had like the drawn children images of brains, and it was fixed mindset the teacher had written, and they were grey. And then they'd written growth mindset, and they'd put rainbows on them. And then she had helped them create for each of them their own affirmation, like their own thing that they say to themselves. And because my son does struggle with a lot, his is, I am resourceful. Like he's welcome to ask and he's welcome to whatever, but he can give it a go first. I'm resourceful. And now I hear him around the house, like when he's trying to do something, like do up a button or, open the dishwasher or the cupboard, like things that I think when you're, what did you say? You said, differently abled. When you're differently abled, I loved that. Things that are commonplace to somebody else. Like, what do you mean you can't do up a button? Or what do you mean you can't undo a zipper or whatever? Like, so he's there and he's like, I am resourceful. And even like he likes to ride his scooter, the little clip that goes under to keep his helmet on. He'll have a go first before. And I'm just been so appreciative of the teacher encouraging. And the other thing, my daughter, she's a bit older, and the boundaries that the school's putting in, she wanted to try out for the debate team. And they had 50 children and they've got 8 spots. And I'm like, someone's going to be hurt. And then they had to bring their cue cards with their prepared speech. And on the day, only 21 of them had cue cards of the 50. And the teacher said, no, you can't try out. Like we told you, you had to have brought a cue card. Oh, I know it in my head. No, sorry. You were told. And a lot of the parents were unhappy with that. But I was like, no, this is teaching them. You can't always just get stuff. Like if you were instructed to do this and you haven't, so they've called it to the 21. So now they've done the speech and they're waiting. So she doesn't know yet. And then just speaking to her afterward, like she's like, I think I was the worst and all these things. I was like, whether or not you make the team, the fact that you had to go, and often we're our own worst critic. Like you'll get off something and you'll be like, oh, that was terrible. Like that podcast episode, that was terrible. And somebody will send you a message and go, that's what I needed to hear today. So even for ourselves as adults, reminding ourselves that like we always get to do our best. Our best gets to get better. But, in schools, there is a lot more, especially since when I went to school, they're bringing in mindset and thought work and mindfulness. And like my son, they've just started a class called ethics. And I was like, what did you learn in ethics? I was so curious because he's 7. He's like, we learned how to be kind. And I just thought that was so cute.
I love that. Wow, how cool is that teacher had taught them like those affirmations. And I feel like that's what we need more of that. I feel like I was talking with somebody just before I came on with you, that, there's so much thought about the money behind the education, but we're forgetting the kids. We're forgetting the importances of the kids. And we're putting so much pressure on the teachers that they're forgetting the kids because they're so worried about all these things. And, over here in the States right now, there's lots to talk about what books are in the library. And, some of it I agree with, some of it I don't agree with, but we're not talking about what are we doing for the kids to help their mindset, to understand that it's okay to have boundaries, to take a breath, to understand, you're differently abled, like with your son. I just think that's so cool that I'm resource. I mean, how cool is that if we could teach our kids at a young age to be like these affirmations, and to hear as a parent like you did, Suzanne, to hear them walk around and say that, it's like, that is so cool. I remember my oldest, when he was struggling with some stuff, I gave him a deck of the cards are called Better Questions, Better Life. And he would, journal with that. He would meditate with it and all of that. And that helped him. And you could see the days that he was doing really good with it. And you could see the days when he wasn't doing it. And so it's so powerful that we can walk through and do those tools. So, and how old are your kids again? 7 and 9, you said?
Yes, 7 and 9.
Oh, that's awesome. So with your kids, so your son's learning this in school. So let's talk about that for a second, because your kids are younger. Often like when my kids hit teen was about when I really started getting into my coaching. They'd be like, "Oh, mom, don't do that with me." So, what things are you taking with what you do for your clients and instilling in with your kids and kind of like planting the seed for them?
Oh, so many things. And my kids, they really benefit from it. And everybody does their business differently. And I appreciate some people don't want a digital footprint for their children and they don't include them, and that's a conscious choice they make. I've gone the other way, and my kids are very much in my business, and I swear they have a bigger following than I do. But it's interesting because I'm also like a hypnotherapist and NLP, other practices that I do. But my son, he runs at home little mindfulness classes now, and he's like, "You close your eyes and we'll go hum for 10 minutes." Like, he doesn't quite understand, but like, and just the practices of, just because you have a thought doesn't mean that it's true. Like, if somebody, especially at school, like, and my daughter's getting towards that age now, she's 9, almost 10, with the hormones and the emotions, we don't know what's going on for other kids. We don't know what's happening in their household. And just because they say something, it doesn't mean that what it would mean here. So just that pause, not to encourage my children to be people pleasers, like, no, not just to put up, but just to kind of question, like, what do you mean by this? Or is it a cultural difference? Or is it like they have something going on at home? Like a kid who was your best friend yesterday and is now, not, what is happening for them, rather than taking everything to heart so much. And just also what's going on for you personally. If something that you've liked, but normally today you don't like that, not to like yell at your friend or be mean to them. It's funny. It's outside the household, there are a lot, the skills seem a lot like, I get lots of comments on it. In the house, they still bicker, they still siblings, we have moments, but they're like, just the ability to just pause rather than instantly react, and to think about, other things as that instant question or the instant thing. Like, it was funny, one boy, he like squeezes my son's cheek and my son doesn't like it. And I was like, maybe we're in his household, that's like a sign of affection, or maybe, and I think he said something about, he didn't say chubby, but he said, some term that my son's like, he means I'm fat. And given my weight history, I'm very sensitive to things about weight. But it was like, we make meanings of things that aren't necessarily true, and then communicating that, this isn't okay for me, rather than saying don't do this at all. And just, being mindful of language and stuff is a lot that we work on.
That's amazing. And I think, if we could do more of that as parents with our kids so young, I think we'd see a lot different reactions with kids at school, and, and having the conversation like with our kids when they come home, be like, just like what you did with your son, like, you don't know what's going on in the home, or maybe that's how they do certain things in the home. I think it's important that we have those conversations that you're doing with your kids. I just love that. So thank you for sharing that with us. And so our listeners, we talk here often, Suzanne, about self-care, and we have what's called the Shiro League. And then the Shiro League, it came out of like before COVID, we kind of had just like, I do a retreat every year in September, and it's a pajama retreat. We come, we show up, we take off our makeup, we're in our PJs the entire weekend long. We work on self-care. We have great speakers that come. We have time at the beach and all that great stuff. Yoga, meditation, all that stuff happens at the retreat. And so one of the things that we I think our third or fourth one, everybody's like, I want to create, we got to do something to stick together. PJ sisters. So we came up with this name, Shiro League. And at the time it meant nothing other than just that. Women that become superheroes of their self-care. But as COVID came, I was seeing that there's so many women who, whether they're professional and had kids, or they were moms with, at home, that they're trying to balance this world of working from home, or maybe you're a CEO mom who ran the house while the husband at work and now he's home, and all this craziness was happening, trying to figure out the balance in the house, that I decided that we needed to do something bigger with the Shiro League. And that's what we started doing on Sunday evenings. All through COVID is when it started. We still to this day do it. The Shiro League meets on Sunday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we just support one another. It was finding our authentic self was one of the things we worked on, like putting self-care first was something we worked on. And now it's just evolved that even after the retreat, things we do after the retreat. And so I said, if we're going to do this, we got to break down Shiro. We got to break down what it means. And so we have our Shiro League, but then I created this 4-month course, and it's called the Shiro Method. And throughout that, the words still stand for the same thing. So the S stands for strong, or your strength, because in the Shiro Method, as we work through this course, we have to find our strength to say no to others, to say yes to ourselves, to stop putting ourselves in this martyr situation, to stop going after the next thing, to enjoy what's happening in that moment. And as we start on that roadmap and we become stronger in understanding, I can do these things, I don't need the next thing, I can be happy with this thing. Then we go into the H, and the H is happy. So you can become happier. And as you become happier, your strength even becomes stronger, because now you're like, this feels good. I'm happy about this feeling. And then we get to the E, and the E is empowered, because as you are stronger and you become happier, I feel like you become more empowered to, you're living the life of saying no, not showing up for anybody else but yourself first. And you're learning to do it without guilt and without judgment. So now you're empowered to go, I want to start a business. I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to do everything in the house. This is a home. Everybody lives here. Let's do it together. You become empowered to walk into what your dream is, because, we don't know what tomorrow brings. And if I learned that lesson, I already knew the lesson, but if I got a reminder, it was last July when I lost my son. Literally, I was talking to him 20 minutes before his tragic car accident. We said we loved each other and all that. I have that blessing to know that we said that before he passed. But it taught me that, you know what, you're not promised the next 30 seconds. So that's the Shiro Method. That's what we do. So once you become empowered, the R stands for radiant, because I feel like you do what's called glow up. I got this from somebody who was my guest. I'm like, I love that glow up. Like, you're glowing up, like you're walking around and people are going, did you lose weight? Like, did you color your hair? Like, what's different about you? And nothing's changed other than you're walking with this confidence that I am like, this is the life I'm supposed to be living. Right. And then you get to the O, and the O is original. And, everybody's talking about be your authentic self and, all that foo-foo stuff. Who are you to the core is what I want to know. Who is that original person in there that was born in this world? Your mom delivered you and fought and went through all that heck for your birth. Who is that DNA? And we break down in this roadmap, we get to that DNA and find this is your original talents. This is what you came in the world with. You've been ignoring it. Maybe it was being a coach. Maybe it was, being a president of the United States, whatever that is, you were ignoring it all this year. So now let's get to it, because you're cheating yourself. But here's the thing. You're cheating everybody else of that original self to learn from those talents you have. And so for me, that's what being a Shiro is. And that's what, when we go through this roadmap, and it's called our Shiro Method, when you go through this roadmap, at the end of the 4 months, you've learned to communicate your realistic expectations with others, because, like we said earlier, we feel guilty when we say no. We feel terrible when we can't do something for our kids because we want to put ourselves first. And at the end of the 4 months, you realize, people call it filling your cup. I call it putting your cape on, and you just don't stick it over your shoulder. Like, you're wrapping it around yourself so tight that you could button it in the back. And when you grasp that you can do that, then you can pour in and give superpowers to those that you love. More of your powers can show up for them, your loved ones, your job, whatever that is that's important to you. But if you don't start that, you're going to stay where you're at today. You're never going to move forward. It's always going to be, why me? I wanted to do that. Why? It's December 31st and you're still doing the same thing you did on January 1st. And so, thinking of those things that I described, Suzanne, I would love to know what about you makes your life and your journey has brought you into your own personal Shiro.
I love that description. I think for me, the shift and the realization that, self first isn't selfish, and for me isn't against you. So, like, sometimes if people ask or they, want something and it's like, it's a no from me, it's not a judgment, or it's not saying that they shouldn't do it, or it's not anything like that. It's just like, I'm unavailable for this. And there's been a few things, especially in recently, where people have been asking for things that is, it's beyond my capacity. And I've just had to have a few conversations that are difficult, but the saying, like, I prioritize my mental health over everything and everyone, because if I'm not well, then I can't be available for even my children. Like, I think so many of us, as mothers, M stands for Marta, and I'm like, no, me first, even before my kids. And it causes contention with some people, and especially some people in my family. And it's like, but I can't hold the space for them. Like, I love your description of a cape. Wrap the cape around me and then encourage them to foster their own capes, rather than taking it off and laying it down as like the magic carpet, Aladdin style, for them while I'm burning into the ground. So for me, the real Shiro thing is, it's been a few examples of where, sitting with my children's disappointment or other people's disappointment and not taking that on as my own. People are allowed, like, I heard something recently and I loved it. They talked about, so often we do things because we're worried we'll harm others. And there's a difference between hurt and harm. And people can be hurt by, my abruptness or my directness or whatever, but they are not harmed. Like, when I say no to my children, or when I hold a boundary, or when I do something, or let them have a consequence to their action, that is, they're going to feel hurt or they're going to feel disappointed, but they are safe. They are not harmed by this. So I think, sometimes that the decisions make, or the hard lines that I call, that other people are like, oh, that's terrible. My vision and my focus is the whole family dynamic, including me, not at the expense of me, and also is, 5-10 years from now, what are they going to learn from these things that are going to help craft them to be the adult they're becoming, rather than them not having the skills. Like, I remember a few things that I've been like, I had no idea. The funniest story that relates to this. So, do you know the game called The Sims? Yeah. So, for the listeners, if you haven't heard of it, basically you have little people and they live a life. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, because, like, why do we spend time in a games creating their life when we could just go and live their own? But anywho, I used to love it. My daughter loves it. She's 9. My 7-year-old has just started playing it. And I showed him what to do. He doesn't really get it, but, he's doing his best. And, he comes over and he's like, Mummy, someone's stealing my stuff. And anyway, I was busy. I was cooking dinner or something. So I said to my husband, I said, Jeremy, can you go and show him how to install a security system? He's like, okay, cool. All right. So he installs the security system or whatever. Anyway, 5 minutes later, they're stealing my stuff again. And Jeremy's like, I got it. And he comes over and he just bursts out laughing. And I'm like, what is it? And he's like, it's the repo man. And I was like, oh, so I'm laughing. And my husband's like, what's a repo man? And we're like, well, you've got to pay your bills or they come and repossess your stuff. He's like, you have to pay bills? It's just so funny. Like, he's 7. He's like, wow, being an adult is so hard. But this is an example. When we don't teach them things, then there's a consequence. So it's kind of like, part of the Shiro's thing is, shaping them. Like, yes, you buy the thing, but then there's utilities and stuff. So I think sometimes there is a lesson. I think of a few things where I moved out of home, and what do they say? You never realize how much your parents do for you until they're not there anymore. And it's like, to be the capable individuals who can fill out a form and do a load of washing and cook a meal and do all the things that they're going to need to do when I'm not there.
I love that. I love that game. I never really played it, but I knew friends who they played it as well. And you're right, because one of the things I taught my boys is to clean, like to clean the house. You do vacuum, those kind of things. And their girlfriends are very happy now that I taught them that stuff, right? So it's really, really important. And even up to that 7 years old, they need to learn those things, because that's, like you said, like teaching the repo man, you got to pay your bills. Like, that's such an important lesson to learn. And the thing is we don't teach that in schools anymore. I know when I went to school, we learned home ec was how to sew and cook and things like that. That was our home ec back then. And we had a sort of a finance class, but we don't do that anymore in our schools. It's not, at least here, we don't have that. I think they're trying to bring it back. And I remember a friend of mine was a teacher, and at least when they got to senior year of high school, they had this kind of financial literacy class. But we don't teach the kids that anymore. And they, and now we don't even write checks and checkbooks anymore. So, all this, stuff that we do, that we didn't do it that way. But I just love that you gave that example. So I want to ask you this question. So one of the things we're doing in the Shiro League is we are finding and sharing what brings us joy. And it's something like I talk about doing your goals for next year starting in October. because I feel like October to the end of December, it's kind of quiet. Everybody's focused on the holidays. So take some of that time and work on what your goals are for the next year. So I told everybody, we're not going to talk goals in January. I want you to get through January, get your rhythm going for the year. But in February, which we started February, but it was interesting. This is a tough, hard one for them. In February, we started with what brings you joy. And so they had to create a list, Suzanne, about 10 things that brought them joy. And they had to not just put down getting up in the morning. That's great, but why does getting up in the morning bring you joy, right? Or their kids. That's great, but what about your kids? I mean, my kids bring me joy every day because I had them on their mom. But what about them makes me joyful, right? Because sometimes our kids can really tick us off. We may not find joy in them in that moment, but what about them brings you joy? So I'm not going to ask you for 10, but I would love for you to share with the listeners, what are your top 3 things that bring you joy and why do they bring you joy?
Such a great question. The number one thing that brings me joy is time on my own. I absolutely love being in the house totally alone. It was so funny with COVID and the long lockdowns. Everyone's like, you must love it. You're such an introvert. I'm like, you don't get it. Everyone else is here. I'm not alone. And the reason, it's just what I love about it, I feel in my body like that quiet. I just feel my cells recharging. Like we plug a phone in to recharge, me being on my own, no one else here. And what I do with that time can vary. Read a book, light a candle, sit in the sun, have a cup of tea. But just that pure alone time where I can totally switch off. My phone's on airplane. That really revitalizes me. Anything by the ocean. So currently I live inland, like an hour and a half from the beach, which is tough for somebody. So I've substituted the bathtub. Just being in water, I feel recharged. I feel connected. I get my best ideas. And for any of my listeners listening to this, because I'll share this up, I write all my newsletters in the bathtub on my iPad. Something recharging about the water. What else do I like? I love really bad comedy, like that is so bad that it's good. And I love sharing that with my children. My husband's totally unavailable. He's like, I can't believe you watch this drivel. Same as reality TV. I'll throw myself under the bus. Like I know it's all scripted, it's not really reality, but I just love the mindlessness of drama that then I don't have to unpack and there's no mystery or murder or whodunit or whatever. It's just like, this is so dumb that it's funny. And the other thing I really love, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's diamond dots. So for anyone listening, it's like lazy person's cross stitch. So instead of having the needle and thread, you basically have a piece of paper that's sticky, and then you lift the sticky back, and then you pick up these little dots with like a little wand, and you put them in place, and they have different colors, and you end up with a little pattern at the end. And the process of doing it, it's funny, when I used to do them, a lot of people frame them and hang them up. I don't have the wall space for that. And also it's the process of doing it, the disconnecting, like what happens at the end. I used to try and find people to give them to or donate them to like elderly people's homes or whatever. Now I just turf them, and people are like, how do you do that? I'm like, well, you do a puzzle and you muck it up. So it's just kind of like that. It's the process of spaciousness I find in the activity. Some people I find that mindlessly boring. I'm like, that's why I like it, because I don't have to engage or think about anything else. But like things where I can just purely switch off bring me so much joy.
I love that because, people do I'm not a crossword puzzle girl, so I'm going to have to look that up. It's called dots, D-O-T-S?
Diamond dots, D-O-T-Z.
Oh, okay. D-O-T-Z, D-O-T-Z. Awesome. I'm going to look that up because,
I know from there, you guys can get it from Michael's or something. We don't have that here, but I know in America they sell it.
I'm going to have to look that up because that's like a great way to to keep your mind, I can see as relaxation, but also keep your mind somewhat sharp. So I think that's really...
Yeah, I listen to podcasts or I listen to audiobooks or I listen to something. So something, because I like to keep my hands busy. I don't tend to just listen. So I like that, my hands can be doing that and then I can be listening to something. And people are like, how do you get through so many books or so many podcasts? I'm like, because walking is another one. I love to walk.
Oh, that's awesome.
But, things where my brain can, absorb the information, but I don't need to be taking notes or anything like that.
Right. That's awesome. So now I love those examples of your joy. So now, Suzanne, we were talking earlier and you made comment too about lists. We have all these lists and everything that we do or don't do, or, I got to finish this. The kids need that. So in order to do the things that bring us joy, there's things that we have to stop doing so we can get to that list that brings us joy. Like for me, I stopped the shoulds. That was a big one for me. The shoulds, just, get rid of the shoulds. But thinking about what things need to be on your not to do list so that you can do the dots, so you can go for the walk, so you can do the things that you enjoy, sitting in a bathtub and all that stuff. What things needs to be on Suzanne's list? Give us 3 things that are on your not to do list.
Worry what other people think. Like that happens a lot, and it's just like, this isn't my business. So, not worrying what other people think. On my not to do list, I never thought about a not to do list before. Basically things that I don't want to do, I either delegate or I ditch. So if it's been on my to-do list for more than a week and it hasn't been done, it's either got to be delegated or ditched. So overthinking, stressing, basically anything that I don't find joy in. And people can think that that's luxurious or lazy, but like, yes, I know that I need movement. Exercise is another word I have a word allergy to, but it doesn't mean CrossFit or spin or something. If you love those things, like, more power to you, have fun. But the only time you're ever going to see me running is if somebody's chasing me. But like, there's finding ways. So on my not to do list would be the way that it should be done, or the best way. Like, because the thing is, that's the fastest way for me not to do it. So finding a way to do the thing that either brings me joy or whatever. And like things like housework, I don't particularly enjoy that. But once again, earbuds in, distractions so that I get the job done. But yeah, no, I don't really think of a not to do list. You put me on the spot there. I'm trumped because yeah,
it's hard because when you think about it, you don't think about what am I doing that's stopping me from enjoying the things I like to do. So, and I'm not a runner either. I've always wanted to be a runner, but I've given that up. I'm not going to be a runner. And I know people are going, but Pearl, think the opposite of run. No, not. But I'm just going to tell you, I don't like to run. I played soccer in school. That was enough for me. So that's so powerful. So tell everybody, Suzanne, how can they connect with you?
Best place to find me is my website. So it's suzanneculberg.com, SuzanneCulberg. I have you could get lost on my website for hours. I used to have, it's funny, I've only recently rebranded it. I had website shame and I'd never tell anybody what it was. But I've recently had it redone. Tech's not my favorite thing. And there's so many things available to you there. I really encourage you to join my newsletter list. It's literally called newsletter. A lot of people say, oh, nobody wants to do that. My newsletters are fabulous. I send them out once a week. You now know I write them in the bath. And it's unique stuff, not things that I share anywhere else. It's not just, hey, here on the blog or new on the podcast. It's, my musings of that week. And if you want to reply or send me a message via email all the way, I'll write back to you. Me, not a bot or my VA. I love communicating via email.
Awesome. Well, we're going to make sure we drop all of that in there as well. So, Suzanne, one of the things we're going to do, and I apologize, I usually tell everybody before we do this, but we didn't. We got right into the show. So I have these cards. They're called Better Questions, Better Life. And so,
I like it.
Oh, they're amazing. You have to order them. You go to betterquestionsbetterlife.com. They're not my cards. I get no money, you guys. I just love these cards. I meditate, all kinds of things around these cards. So I'm going to shuffle them. I'm going to have you tell me when to stop. And then I'm going to read the card and have you answer that card. Okay.
I love it. Okay. Right.
So here we go. You tell me when to stop.
Stop.
All right. So what would it be like if it was easy?
I love that. My word of the year last year was ease. Yeah, for me, what comes up immediately is just relief. My shoulders relax. And I just think of not getting caught up in the minutiae of, all the little things. It's like, we'll figure it out. And I think, childlike energy. It's like where they just go have a go. Whereas sometimes as an adult, it's like, well, I can't do this because I don't have that and I don't have that. So if it's be easy, I'd be embodying that childlike energy and I'd just be figuring it out as I went along.
That is a great answer. I love that. That is so awesome. So I just want to thank you so much for coming and joining us here all the way from Australia in the next day of the world. And I appreciate you coming on. And for those that are listening, remember our retreat is in September, the 14th to the 18th. And we have 4 spots left. So your cost of the retreat includes everything you need at the retreat except for lunch out on Sunday. And you also get 6 weeks in our positive intelligence course. So a lot of what we talked about today with Suzanne, we talk about those people pleasing, the martyr feeling, all of that stuff. We talk about how to release that and how to name your saboteur. And then you also get to attend our vision purse. So Suzanne, we make vision purses instead of vision boards. So you carry a purse with you wherever you go. And all that's included. Plus, you get to be in the Shiro League that you hear me talk about often here. You get 1 year membership in the Shiro League. So that's like a $3,000 bonus that you're getting along when you sign up the retreat. So if you want to learn more about the retreat, go to wslivingretreats.com. So that's wslivingretreats.com and join us because you don't want to miss out. We only have 4 spots left. And before we sign off, again, I want to remind you that you come into this world, you're this rough oyster on the outside. And as you work on finding your inner self, you find your inner pearl. And I hope you go out today and I hope you find your inner pearl of greatness. Make it an amazing day.
Hello, sunshine.